What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet, presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory, Waldron, and Sasa, Bubotic. What's up, guys?
What's up?
They say Sacramento is basketball hell, but I think we're going to find out the truth today.
Guess we will. It should be an interesting one. Like Kory mentioned, we'll be talking about the Kings today. But before we get started, as always, quick reminder, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. But today we are talking about the Kings coming in number 29 in our rankings. Before we talk about the rankings and preview next season, we'll talk a little bit about last year. 27-55, one of the worst offenses, one of the worst defenses in the league. What were your thoughts on the Kings last season?
Well, first of all, Dave Yeager's kind of still stuck in the past in terms of his offense. Like, he's putting Willie Cauley-Stein in the high post, and like De'Aaron's not getting pick and roll touches, and there's just a whole lot of stuff going on there. Buddy Hield's shooting 40% from deep, and we don't let him shoot more than like 3 threes a game. And I mean, it's not all bad because I feel like De'Aaron, at the end of the day, he could be a solid Mike Conley type realistically, like if he gets his jump shot fixed. So I'm happy with it, but guys like Willie Cauley-Stein are throwing me off, which we'll talk about later. And it's cool. It's not basketball hell. It's cooling down a little bit.
More like purgatory?
Yeah, there's like a key up there and you can get out. We'll figure it out somehow.
Cauley-Stein's the tallest, maybe he's the closest to it, right? Yeah, I mean, this team has shown some nice moments. I mean, I think like Bogdanovic, the other Bogdanovic, had a nice season last year. De'Aaron Fox had some explosiveness. I mean, he had like a game-winning dunk, right, against the Miami Heat, like a putback.
Yeah, it was a putback against them to win the game.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. Willie Cauley-Stein, I do like him. I feel like he's a mix between JaVale McGee and DeAndre Jordan. Like he's somewhere in between those two guys, which I guess is a really wide range. But I don't dislike him. I think if Harry Giles could get on the court, that'd be cool. They just have a lot of big men on this roster. Obviously, they just got done drafting Marvin Bagley III. But I just want to know what kind of direction they're going in. And last year, I think you saw some things from some of the young guys. And, we're just moving forward. And obviously, Zach Randolph was kind of the best player on that team last year for much of the year.
And talking about kind of what Sasha mentioned, this team was last in pace. So you think a team with De'Aaron Fox at point guard, known for his speed, would play a little bit faster, but obviously kind of stuck in that old school game. Offensive rating 29, defensive rating 28 in the league. So there's a lot of issues. 12-year playoff drought. So last year, obviously, they added the vets hoping to win more games. They definitely didn't really do that. Now they're kind of caught in a weird spot because they don't have their pick next year. But like we said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. What would be the highlight of last season for the Kings?
Oh, it'd have to be either De'Aaron's tip dunk game winner that we just talked about against the Heat, or Buddy Hield had a game against the Clippers where he registered like 4 steals and like 16 points in the fourth quarter. Like he literally just destroyed them single-handedly. That was one of the most amazing moments I've seen as a Kings fan. Like, I don't know, I can't even describe it. Like that game was just bananas. Buddy went off.
Yeah, I didn't see the Buddy game, so I'm going to have to say just the De'Aaron Fox putback dunk. That was probably the biggest moment for me that stuck out.
For me, I'll probably go with who Kory mentioned before, Bogdanovic. I thought he had a really impressive season, finally coming over from international game to the NBA, averaged 11 points a game, 44% from the field, 39 from 3, showed some nice basketball IQ, really impressive. I've heard the comparison of something between a Manu Ginobili to an Evan Fournier. So I really like what Bogdanovic can do, and I'm sure the Kings are pretty happy about having him.
Oh yeah, I definitely enjoy Bogdanovic. He's got a nice game. He takes the smart shots, but he's also good off the dribble. He makes the right passes, and he tries on defense. He might not be the quickest guy on the court, but he's always hustling for the defensive rebound, or he's always trying to get the shot block from behind, kind of like Larry Bird always tries. So like, I enjoy him. I just think Bogdan's issue is this team is so stocked on shooting guard. He's only like a 6'6" wing, so it's gonna be hard for him to play small forward. That's the only issue I have right now with the team. So
yeah. And there's been some rumblings of people saying maybe the Kings would look to move him because he's such a good fit with a lot of different teams. But what would be your biggest disappointment of last season for the Kings?
I'm going to have to go with Willie Cauley-Stein. I feel like it's just because I have such high expectations for him, because I look at a dude who's like 7'1". He's got like a nice like 37-inch vert. He runs like a guard. Like, he's explosive. He had Kevin Durant and CJ McCollum talking all about him in their podcast. And now it's like I watch the guy and he stands on the long two, like 16 to 23 feet, and just chucks up jump shots, or like he won't grab rebounds. And it's just like He's somewhere, like he said, Kory said before, you go between JaVale McGee and DeAndre Jordan. It's like he's somewhere in there, but then sometimes like he wants to be like Kristaps, and it's like just play your game and you'll get paid and you'll do really well. That's my I don't know. I feel weird about Willie Trill Cauley-Stein. Quote.
It's tough to say most disappointing for me. I mean, it's because I didn't expect much from De'Aaron. I mean, actually, I probably would have to say De'Aaron Fox. I think last year I made the bold prediction that he was going to finish top 3 in Rookie of the Year. So I guess I'll go with him only because he didn't live up to my giant expectations. But I don't think he was bad in the 73 games he played last year. Obviously, the jump shot needs to develop further, needs to be more consistent. I mean, he only shot 41% last year from the field, 30% from 3. So maybe just him fine-tuning his game would probably be my biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I think De'Aaron was solid more so. I think I had less expectations to you, but I think there was a lot of development going into last season. I could see the Willie Cauley-Stein point because he also like kind of hyped himself up coming into the season, kind of expecting more of him. And he was kind of expected to be this lockdown defensive player, and I don't think he's hit that level yet. I'd say Skal Lesbier was another guy that I think he had a really nice end of the previous season, and it didn't really carry over. And there was even talks about the Kings trying to move him as well. So I think there was a lot of disappointment. You could even put in George Hill, who it felt like just didn't want to be there for the first half of the season. And that just whole thing with adding all the veterans really didn't work out.
Yeah, I agree with that about George Hill. I feel like George Hill definitely didn't want to be there after the second game. I think he realized De'Aaron was going to take his spot, and he was just like, I'm not going to get paid after this. So, like, he wanted to get out, which is understandable. I understand.
Yeah, you could tell by his body language that he just wasn't really interested in the situation, like you said, maybe after the second game. But moving on to the rankings portion, obviously the OTG staff has ranked all these teams, and their first team yesterday was the Atlanta Hawks at number 30. Now at number 29 is the Sacramento Kings. What do you think of this ranking?
Honestly, I agree with it outright. I think it's just at a point where this team's not going to compete for the title, especially with the West being so deep right now, where you got so many fringe playoff teams like Denver, the Grizzlies, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Mavericks, all sitting around probably 8 seed, 7 seed type. They're not going to get close to that, and they're probably not going to beat teams like the Suns, who've developed now with DeAndre Ayton, with Devin Booker, and all these guys are starting to come together more so than our core. I feel like Atlanta's the only team we're going to be better than, so I completely agree with that ranking.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. This is a good ranking as well. 29 is pretty accurate. I think they're slightly better than the Hawks, which I think is going to be a dumpster fire. But again, this is going to be a team that we see struggle a lot. There's looking for those core guys, Fox, Cauley-Stein, Hield, Bogdanovich, Marvin Bagley now. For those guys who really just play some big minutes and just develop further.
Yeah, I think the ranking is pretty spot on. Like you guys said, they're definitely better than the Hawks. Any of the other teams are really unsure. I think regardless, they'll probably finished bottom 5, bottom 3. So I think it's a pretty fair ranking. But talking about some of the additions, we'll start with the draft pick, Marvin Bagley, 2nd overall. Obviously, they passed on Luka. There was some question about the fit, having all the bigs already on the roster. And then Bagley's an athletic monster, but there is some defensive issues. What were your thoughts on Bagley at number 2?
I was surprised. I thought Luka was going number 2, especially with all the Europe connection, with Peja being named the assistant GM and then Vlade running it. I figured those guys would see like guys from around their country and they would kind of pick him. I was disappointed. I've always said it. I was disappointed to pick Luka, but watching Bagley, I've kind of grown to like the kid a little bit in the summer league. While he isn't like the most, how am I going to say it, the most technical kid in terms of he doesn't have a right hand. He doesn't defend at a really high level. He has a high motor, and you can tell he kind of tries his hardest on the court. He's always trying to go for the board, even though he weighs like 210 pounds soaking wet at this point. And I think he has a great mentor in Zebo, who's a guy who's a lefty, never really developed his right hand, but developed all those boxing out techniques. I think he'll be fine. He'll learn well, be a good pick. I think at worst, he reminds me of Chris Anderson with a little bit more athleticism. And if he hits his peak, like his absolute peak, I could see him being like Zebo with athleticism, which is a great offensive player who might be below average on defense. So I like him a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't I think you can make a case for anyone who didn't pick Doncic that they made a mistake. But to me, this pick made somewhat sense. I mean, they didn't want to kind of challenge De'Aaron Fox. I don't think De'Aaron Fox and Doncic could have coexisted. So you would have been either, moving Fox or whatever the case. And Bagley has shown In some of the summer league games, he was shooting the ball well. I think the first game, he showed that he does have a high motor. Obviously, as you mentioned, he can't necessarily use both of his hands fully yet, but that's something you can probably work on. I don't think it was a bad pick. I'm actually pretty high on Bagley.
I think Bagley will be a solid player, but I don't think I was a huge fan of the fit in the pick at this spot. Like you guys said, I think I would have went with Luka. I think De'Aaron Fox, you really don't know what he's going to be for sure anyways. And I think you could probably try to make De'Aaron Fox and Luka work. Worst case, you move him down the road. But what would you say is the ceiling for Bagley? What's his highest potential?
It depends on his defense. Where his defense goes is the biggest thing for me, because he tries on defense. It's not like he doesn't try. It's just that he doesn't understand the whole nuances to it. Like I said, I think at his very, very peak, when he hits his absolute peak, he could be like a Zach Randolph, where if he muscles up enough, gets enough muscle in him, and he keeps that athleticism, he's going to be able to outrun all the other forwards. He's going to be stronger than them at that point. He can jump over them, grab rebounds over all of them. And if he develops that jumper, at that point, he's the triple threat. He can shoot, he can pass, he can rebound. I think his peak is higher than a lot of guys in his draft, but also his floor is below a lot of guys.
Yeah. When I look at Bagley, this might be a weird comparison, but I kind of see like if he develops defense that he's possibly like a Thaddeus Young, and he can be kind of that high motor guy, maybe slightly better offensively, but I don't know. If he develops some kind of defense, I think the ceiling is a lot higher. But I think Thaddeus Young, to me, is a guy I think Marvin Bagley could turn into, maybe like a better version offensively.
Yeah, defense is definitely going to be a major concern for him moving forward and what he could do with that. But looking at some of the other additions, the Kings are pretty active in some sense. They did make a trade. They traded Garrett Temple for Deontay Davis, Ben McLemore, and a second-round pick. What were your thoughts on Davis and McLemore coming back to Sacramento?
As long as McLemore isn't guarded by Kawhi Leonard, I feel okay. Listen, if the guy just stands on the three-point line and hits his wide-open jumpers and he rim runs and he doesn't try to do anything extra, I feel like he could still be an okay player, but that's like a 20% chance of happening. I think the dude's done. This is his last stop in the league, and he's probably going to be out after this year. And Deontay, he's interesting. Like, he grabs rebounds, he blocks shots, he tries, but my issue with him is there's so many bigs in the team that need time, and I don't think he's going to get any unless he goes to the G League or gets traded. So, not too much hype from me.
I don't have much hype on. I really don't have much to say on this. I gotta be. I don't know much.
Yeah, McLemore, I feel like coming back, it's just like there's a chance that he might not even make the team. Davis has shown flashes of being an interesting rotation big where he can kind of block some shots, run to the rim a little bit, provide a little toughness. But I've heard that they might not even make the team. Do you guys think these two will be on the Kings roster come opening night?
I hope not.
I'm right there with you.
I don't want them there. We don't need them.
Yeah. And they got the second-round pick, and, it's not like Garrett Temple had a ton of value in the league, so it's not a horrendous trade. But looking at the free agent signing, Nemanja Bjelica, after agreeing to sign with the Sixers and then telling them he was going to go play in Europe, and then he decides to sign with the Kings, 3-year deal, $20 million and change. Last year, not guaranteed. What are your thoughts on this deal?
I like him a lot. It's interesting because the guy's kind of like a combo forward, but it's hard for him because he's not fast enough to play small forward. But I feel like in spurts, because the Kings have no small forwards on the roster right now, he could easily space the floor, make great passes. I've seen him. He was always a positive in Minnesota by all his advanced stats. So I'm happy to see him. I've always liked him. He's from my country. Shout out to him. He's a good player. I enjoy him.
Yeah, he's like a poor man's Gallinari. The only thing that's weird about this, I like him as well. I think and he got paid. From the player standpoint, it's weird because you could have been with a winning or a team that's on the up and up in the Sixers and been in a winning environment, and possibly in the NBA Finals if everything goes right for the Sixers this year. And then you chose to go to Europe, and then you chose to come back and play for the Kings. So, I wish I could have been in whatever phone conversation he had that was able to sway him out of Europe to come to the Kings. But yeah, I think, it's another guy. He's probably going to play a lot of power forward. Maybe they play him at the small forward. But like you said, Sasa, a lot of his advanced stats, he was really good for the Wolves when he did play, even though he only played, I think, like 20 minutes per game. So I don't necessarily dislike this. I just don't necessarily understand it.
Yeah, I don't think it's a terrible deal. Like, they definitely could use the shooting, but the money number and maybe the longer amount of years. The one positive, though, is that 30 years not guaranteed. I'm sure the Kings are looking to have cap flexibility moving forward, maybe to gather some more assets. But I think it'll help them in the sense of shooting and have another solid player on the floor, because I think the Kings do want to win games this year. They want development talent, but they want to have some type of wins out there. And I think Bjelica could help with that. But like Kory said, it is interesting deciding to, go from the Sixers to the Kings. I think maybe a lot of it, the Kings probably told him he'll get more playing time than what the Sixers would have offered.
I agree.
What about Yogi Ferrell? 2-year deal, second year not guaranteed. I think 2 years, $6 million. Played some really solid minutes in Dallas. What were your thoughts on the Kings adding him?
I like him. I'm excited to have him just because he can space the floor really well. He takes a lot of threes. Some of them are really bad threes, but he makes them. So I feel like he just fixes his shot selection. His percentages could go up. He's aggressive, but he also doesn't do what I call the Frank Mason special, which is putting your head down and barreling into 3 people and chucking up a floater. He's a defensive liability, but at the end of the day, he's a backup point guard. And if he plays with Fox or Hield or Bogdanovich, he can guard the worst offensive player on the perimeter, and one of them can guard the tougher cover, and he can space the floor for all those guys. So I like the pickup.
Yeah, I mean, so he backed out of his deal with the Mavs. Went to the Kings, where he probably will get some more playing time. I like Ferrell from his days in Indiana, in college. He last year, he had some nice moments. I don't think he necessarily, raises the ceiling for the Kings at all. But I think he's definitely a solid backup point guard. He can also play some of the 2 guard if you want to play some smaller lineups. He shoots the 3 decently well. I actually really like this signing as well for the Kings. This is a good guy.
Yeah, I think the Yogi Ferrell signing was pretty solid. Like you guys said, backup guard, can shoot the 3 ball. He can play off ball a little bit. And it's funny, it's another guy who backed out of his contract with a team to go with the Kings. I wonder what these guys are offering them under the table or something, because you rarely ever see that, and to see it twice with the same team is really interesting. But overall, I think both signings are pretty solid. If you had to say, which signing do you like a little bit more than the other?
Oh, Yogi, definitely, just because of the fit. I like Nemanja, but I don't know. He doesn't fit that well in the roster, so.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you with Yogi. I also just, he's quicker, he's a little bit faster, and I think he's a little bit more what he can do from the 1 and 2 guard position. I just like a little bit better than Bjelica.
Yeah, and he's younger, so he fits the timeline a little bit better. Bjelica has played a lot of international basketball, so he's starting to get up there in age.
Bjelica's 30, right?
Yeah, I think he's right up there. So it's not like he has a ton left in the tank, especially when you have a young team of a lot of like rookies, 2nd and 3rd year players. But talking departures, we mentioned the trade before. They lost Garrett Temple. Thoughts on losing him?
I'm gonna miss him just because he was a great defender. He had interesting shot selection. Some games he put up some ridiculous shots. He had a ridiculous game winner, if I remember earlier in the year, off the dribble 3-pointer in someone's face. I'm going to miss him mainly because all the young guys will talk about how good of a mentor he was, and you could see it on the court when they would make a mistake. He'd be the one talking to them about it. So I'm definitely going to miss that departure.
Yeah, from, like you said, from a leadership role, they definitely could have used him. I think he also played like 1 through 3. He played a little bit of everything. He's 6'6". He's versatile. He plays good defense. His shooting numbers are good. For me personally, it's about time that Garrett Temple actually went to a team where he can actually probably have a bigger impact and play more in more winning games. But yeah, for the Kings' standpoint, this is definitely a guy you're probably going to miss. But I think Amon Shumpert, to a degree, can fill some of the holes of Temple.
Yeah, it seems like they want it worked out for both parties, because Temple obviously opted in because he wanted the money, but there wasn't going to be as many minutes for him on the Kings because they wanted to play some of the younger guys. So moving into Memphis, a team that could use him, and then getting the 2nd-round pick, I think it worked out. But like you guys said, leadership, intangibles, versatility, just a solid basketball player you could put out there. Nothing too crazy, but it will be a loss. Free agent-wise, they lost a couple guys, nothing huge. Vince Carter, Jakar Sampson, Bruno Caboclo, Nigel Hayes, and Jack Cooley. Any thoughts on these guys leaving?
I'm going to miss Jack Cooley because I only own 2 Kings jerseys. I own a Vlade one and a Jack Cooley one.
Oh. I know he was a fan favorite. He was a fan favorite, I heard.
Oh, yeah. We used to just blow up. Like, I went to the Summer League game. I live in Florida, but I went there for a game. I think it was last year, and like he would get a rebound and the crowd would just lose their minds as if this dude's like Michael Jordan free throw line dunking. It's great.
I think maybe, I don't know. I don't really miss any of these. I don't think they miss anybody. I don't really miss any of these guys leaving. Maybe Vince Carter. I don't know. He'll play the same amount of minutes though. That's probably more minutes in Atlanta, so maybe that's actually a good thing. None of these guys, I think, you're missed overly too much.
Yeah, you might miss Vince a little bit from the leadership standpoint, but other than that, I think everybody else was kind of like a flyer, a fringe NBA guy, and they're going to kind of look at some different guys this year, similar to the Hawks, which we talked about in the last show. But getting to the prediction section, probably the most fun part of the show. What is your opening night starters for the Kings?
So if I'm Dave, I would start De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Bogdanovich, Giles, and Willie. However, knowing Dave, he's probably going to go with Fox, Hield, Bogdanovich, Zach Randolph, and Willie Cauley-Stein.
I think for me, it's De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield, Bogdanovich, Marvin Bagley, and Cauley-Stein would be my starting five.
Yeah, I would go with that with my starting lineup as well. But like Sasha was saying, I could see Jaeger going with possibly Zebo or some veterans or something to kind of go back to something they had last year and not playing the young guys, and maybe that changing a little bit later on. Position battles, do you think there's going to be any positions up for grabs, starting lineup or certain roles on the team that we're going to see guys battling out for?
Power forward and center, easy. Giles is going to be fighting with Zach Randolph, and Willie Cauley-Stein is going to have to ward off Giles and Bagley and Koufos, because Koufos, nobody talks about it, but he was one of those guys where he's always set a strong screen. He was always at the right place on defense. He's just not a crazy athletic guy, nor is he flashy, so no one really notices him on the court. But, there's a lot of position battles down in the front court that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I think power forward for sure would be one of them. You mentioned Sasa. I wouldn't be surprised if Zebo started. And then maybe, Bagley or maybe even if Giles got healthy, they battle for that position. Maybe small forward if Justin Jackson has a better sophomore season. I know he didn't shoot overly well his rookie year, but maybe he, hones in some skills and he battles Bogdanovich a little. But you're right. The front court is where a lot of the action is going to be.
Yeah, it seems like that power forward position could be the one. I mean, obviously, Zebo being a vet, Bagley being the second overall pick, and Giles having that little bit of excitement behind him finally being healthy. But who would be your breakout starter this season?
Ooh, I would say Buddy Hield. That's my take. Just because last season he developed a lot more than I thought he would, because the season before I just assumed him being a spot-up shooter. His handle is kind of weak. He didn't play good defense. This year, it got to a point where they had Devin Booker mic'd in one game. And he looked at De'Aaron Fox and he goes, if you guys want to stop me, you need to put Buddy on me because no one else on your team can guard me. And I was like, oh, he's developed on defense then finally. He's finally figured something out. He's got guys like Devin Booker, actually saying, he's a good defender. You're going to want to put him on me if you want to stop me. So I'm excited for Buddy. His handle improved a lot. And I think this year especially, is if the floor starts spacing out a little bit more, he might have more chances to take it to the rim, put up his patent one-leg Kobe floater thing that he does all the time. So I'm excited for him.
Buddy was my pick, but I'll pick somebody else. But I just want to piggyback off that. I think Buddy Hield has often been compared to Kobe. I know he's a big Kobe fan and all that. Like you mentioned, he has progressed. Each year in the NBA so far, he's gotten slightly better. I wouldn't be surprised if he jumped out and, like you said, his defense has kind of caught up. His handles got a little bit better. I think you need to be a little bit more aggressive on offense. But I definitely like where Buddy Hield is heading. For me, I'm going to go with De'Aaron Fox. I'm just a big fan of Fox since his college days in Kansas. So I think I'm just expecting him to be a little bit more efficient, help push the pace more. Obviously, as you guys mentioned earlier, the pace for this team was very slow last year. I'm expecting them to try and get a little bit faster, a little bit more up-tempo, and that's going to start with De'Aaron Fox.
And I think overall pushing the pace helps a lot of young players get some more open shots, puts them in an easier situation than going against a half-court defense. So I think it'd help build up the confidence. I'm going to go with Bogdanovich. I think he really showed a lot last year, and I think he'll take another step this year. He might hit his ceiling, but I think he'll be more confident in himself and maybe willing more to take shots on his own instead of making his teammates better, because I know a lot of Kings fans are big believers in him. But I also can see Buddy and De'Aaron Fox as well making a jump. This is going to be a big developmental year for the Kings overall. Talking about the bench, though, who would be your breakout bench player?
Harry Giles, easy. I was talking to my friend about it. Like, I was watching all these clips, like, during the season where Harry Giles would work out with Vince Carter before games and everything, and he just looked so smooth and well. And I was telling my friend, I'm like, if this kid hits his ceiling, he's going to be like Chris Webber. Like, he has that, like, throwing the crazy passes. He runs the break. He's quick. He's got, like, the charisma, but he also plays really good defense. And I remember in the summer league, he was playing against the Wagner kid, the big dude on the
Wagner, yep.
first game. And Wagner fouled him. Ref didn't give him the call, so he got mad and he came down the court and just swatted the guy like 3 times in a row, just yelling in his face. And I'm like,
that's what you like to see.
I'm like, this kid's gonna be the breakout star of the team.
Again, that's the guy I was gonna pick, but I think it depends on who's the actual starter. So, I mentioned Bagley as a starter, but if he doesn't start, then I think Bagley's going to be the breakout bench player and then eventually become a starter. But really, I want to go with Harry Giles. I think Giles is finally going to be healthy. I love the tenacity that he brings. He could be really exciting, and he's playing, I think he's going to play with just a little extra oomph. Not being able to play the last couple of years, having all the injuries, I feel like it's kind of like an Embiid situation where he's just going to be so, thrilled and pumped up on adrenaline when he finally gets back out there. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he's surely going to be a big part of this Kings bench unit.
Yeah, it's a clean sweep for Harry Giles. I mean, I think there's just a lot of hype around him and finally being healthy, and then you have a big chip on your shoulder missing so much time, and he's going to have an opportunity to play with the Kings. So if he can just come out and do his thing and stay healthy, I think it'll be a really nice season for him.
And he's still only 20 years old.
Yeah, it's incredible. Especially a young age, a lot to still develop. Obviously, add muscle to his body. It could be one of the brighter pieces for the future of the Kings.
His jump shot's so nice too. Like, if you watch, it's a smooth form. Like, the way he shoots it is just like, it's a nice, easy release. You can tell he doesn't struggle. Whereas, like, I watch like Bagley shoot and he looks like he's hucking like a catapult.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's just a lot of potential with him and being so young. And you're hoping the Kings can kind of get all of that out of him. But talking about best case scenario for the Kings next season, what are you thinking?
Best case scenario, Marvin Bagley and Giles get the start immediately. Giles ends up playing like Chris Webber, ends up being great. Bagley grabs every rebound he sees in his sight. De'Aaron develops this three-pointer. The team runs at the fastest pace in the league, and we make the 8th seed, and we lose in round 1 to the Warriors. Best case scenario.
That is best case scenario if I've ever heard best case scenario. For me, best case scenario, because they don't have their pick, so they don't obviously want to tank, especially because the Celtics have it. So who wants the Celtics to get more value from their chest of assets, which is dwindling now. So I'm going to say best case scenario is they get in the upwards between, 27 and 32 wins, which, still has that pick probably as a lottery, but it's not a high lottery. As you mentioned, Harry Giles stays healthy. He plays well. Marvin Bagley wins a starting position. De'Aaron Fox becomes more efficient. Bogdanovich just raises his game. Willie Cauley-Stein becomes more consistent. We see him kind of become a defensive rim runner, a rim protector, a guy who can rebound a high click. And, the team, as you guys mentioned, gets faster in pace.
Yeah, I see. I'm not definitely as optimistic as you guys. I think the West is just so tough. So best case scenario is probably like 28 to 30 wins, but most of the young guys making a jump. I think really the win total doesn't matter a ton because I don't think there's much of a chance to make the playoffs at all. So if you can get a jump from all of your young pieces, even if it's a small jump, then going to the next season where I believe they have at least 40 million in cap space and then more probably moving forward, and they could probably move the books around a little bit. You kind of are trying to make Sacramento more attractive. So if you can just get some of these young pieces to work out, I think that'd be best case scenario. But what would be your worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario, De'Aaron doesn't develop his jumper at all. Giles gets hurt again. Marvin Bagley looks more like Thomas Robinson than Zach Randolph. And I go in a depressive rut for like 8 months.
We don't want that.
My worst case scenario is all of that, and then they get only 15 to 22 wins on the season, and the Celtics get another top draft pick.
Yeah, I think worst case would be like 20 wins, no jumps and player development from the team. Overall, the team is just bad. I think you probably fire Dave Yeager, bring in another head coach, maybe more of a player developmental guy, and then the pick goes to either Philly or Boston, because I believe Philly still has a pick protected number 1 overall. So if it were to be the number 1 pick in the draft, it would go to Philly. If it was like top 3 or whatever else, it would go to Boston. I think that would just suck for
I
Kings
hope
fans.
that happens. That would be awesome if RJ Barrett goes to Philly.
I mean, it is a possibility. No offense to the Kings, but I think they could definitely end in that bottom 3 in the lottery chances. Obviously, the lottery numbers are changing a little bit this year, but it is a potential thing. Actual prediction, though, what do you think will really happen for the Kings?
We hit 25, 27 wins. Everyone develops. Giles plays relatively well, like 12 points, 6 rebounds, something like that. And Marvin Bagley just develops his jumper as the season goes on. That's my realistic one.
For me, I'm going to say 23 wins on the season. Bagley has the typical rookie season where he probably finishes top 5 in rookie of the year voting, but he's not too special, but he doesn't look bad. Just looks like a guy who's got a long way to develop. De'Aaron Fox takes some slight strides forward, but the guys you really see develop are going to be Buddy Hield and Willie Cauley-Stein. And hopefully, and my prediction too, Giles stays healthy.
Yeah, I think 24 wins for me. I think you'll see player development from the guys, but I think early in the season, some of the youngers and the rookies are going to struggle. But then come, March and April, things will start to pick up and it'll look a little bit brighter for the Kings. Hopefully they can get some real player development this year and maybe move one of the vets or something, or one of the contracts they have for an asset midseason. I think that's what they're looking to do. If there was some way for them to get a first-round pick, I think they'd be really excited about it. I believe they still have 10 to 11 million in cap space, so they could help facilitate a bigger trade around the deadline. I think what they really want is probably a first-round pick, even if it's a late first-round pick for next year's draft. Moving on from the predictions, though, we're going to the truth. So with this segment, we pick an emoji to represent this team. What would be the emoji that represents the Kings?
The shrugging emoji. Whatever happens this season happens. We don't have our pick. Hopefully everyone develops. If they don't, it's the same old, same old.
For me, it's the no emotion face. Just staring, waiting to see what this team can become or not become, and just hoping some of these guys develop. Because right now, if some guys don't pay off, then the Doncic move looks obviously a lot worse. So for me, it's just a straight face until we really see what this Kings team is.
Yeah, I have the upside down smiley face on this one. I just feel like, looking at the Kings, it's like you're kind of smirking and laughing, and then you're like, God, what are they doing? Obviously, all the bad things. Maybe this is the year they finally turn around. League pass-wise, where would you rank this team 1 through 10?
If they're allowed to run, I would say I'd rank them at a 6, just because they're young and they're going to do some fun stuff. If they run the high post, low post offense again, put them at like a 3.
I gave the Hawks 1.5, right? So I'll say 1.7 for the Kings.
Wow. Big jump.
Also keep in mind to the listeners, I have to work at 3 a.m. So for me, league pass, wait, am I going to stay up to watch the Kings? Probably not. So for me, it's low. But if they're playing like the Pacers or they're playing an East Coast team and they're playing a little bit earlier, and I'm not gonna tune out because I do have interest in seeing how Bagley plays Fox and what's his name, Harry Giles.
Yeah, I believe I gave the Hawks like a 3.5 or a 4, and I'll kind of keep that same thing with the Kings. There's not a ton of excitement in terms of like basketball, but there's a lot of young talent, and I'm sure they'll be in a lot of great games because the defense isn't great, so there'll be a lot of high-scoring events. So I'll give them like a 3.5. Now, obviously, Sasha, you follow this team, so you have more interest, but what TV show would you watch over the Kings? This isn't a hypothetical because obviously we all cover basketball, so we're preferring the NBA, but in the situation where you're picking a TV show over the Kings, what would it be?
Ooh, if I was picking a TV show over the Kings, probably Game of Thrones, because watching Vlade backstab GMs and somehow pull Yogi Ferrell and Nemanja, it's just like a Game of Thrones episode.
It is.
It's just so interesting. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't understand what's happening with the team, just like you don't understand what's happening in Game of Thrones. The next thing you know, someone just ends up developing, or in Game of Thrones, someone ends up dying. So either way, it's a fun time.
The red wedding is the purple wedding. For me, I'm not actually a big fan of the Marvel TV shows. Sorry, Nick.
You could get off this podcast now. We don't need it.
But I did like the first couple episodes of the Punisher series. I didn't finish it. I was in the middle of finals, and I just never got back to it. So that's probably a show I would watch over the Kings only because I would like to get caught up on it.
I think the Punisher series is one of the better ones, so I'm really
I
disappointed.
I looked through 4 episodes, but I just couldn't. I just got a little busy.
Tisk. For me, I'll go with a show that I don't really like watch a lot independently. It's more of like one of my girlfriend's shows, and that's Orange is the New Black. And similar to what Sasha said, there's a lot of backstabbing and someone ends up dead. Same thing with the Kings. You don't really know what's going to happen if someone's going to backstab a GM or whatnot. But any other takes on here about the Kings before we get out of here?
I like Wendy Gabriel, the two-way player they signed. I actually, he was like a top 15 prospect in his high school draft, and he didn't get picked up at all in the NBA draft. They signed him on a two-way contract, and I was watching him play, and I was like, oh, this dude doesn't look that bad. So if you guys see some random ass 6'9", 205 dude running around on the court, you know who he is.
Well, there we go. That's some inside info right there. What do you think about Dave Yeager's job? Do you think he'll be gone by the end of the season, or he's on the hot seat? What about his position as head coach?
Well, they said Vivek really wants to make the playoffs.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Yeager's gone after the season, even if he develops a team beautifully, even if he lets them run and do everything. I just think Vivek's just such an insane owner. This dude's literally like the Joker. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just kind of like spray painting his face everywhere and doing whatever he wants. So I don't think he's staying there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he got fired. This is just one of the jobs where the coaches, I feel, every coach for the last 5 years gets an unfair evaluation on what the team is compared to what ownership thinks the team should be. So I would not be surprised if Dave Yeager lost his job at some point this year or after the season. And just looking at their schedule, they may not even have a win heading into November. I mean, they play like the Jazz, the Pelicans, the Thunder, the Nuggets just to start off. And then they play the Hawks on November 1st and the Magic on October 30th. Those are probably the first 2 games they can really have a chance of winning in my eyes. So it could be a rocky start. Who knows? Maybe Yeager gets fired right off the gate. They go like 0-8.
Could see a possibility. What do you think is a bigger issue for the Kings? Is it ownership or the front office?
Ownership for sure, because I have Vlade, I think, for as much flack as I've given him for picks like Papagiannis and stuff like that, he's made a ton more picks where I'm like, that was actually really smart. Like Labissiere was a smart gamble. It was a smart gamble to go for Giles. Like these guys were quick, easy gets. And I think he makes a lot of smart decisions. He does want the team to run faster. He said that many times. He doesn't know how to communicate with the media, which is really frustrating because he says some ridiculous things like, I had a better trade 2 days ago, which you just don't say. But
in the fact he said the Kings are a super team.
Yeah, like, which I understood in the context. He was saying like they're young, they have the talent to do it. But like I said, he doesn't understand how to communicate. But I think he's a good GM. I just think Vivek comes down and rains down Stauskas. If you've ever seen the great draft room video, where he just screams Stauskas for like 13 minutes straight, makes them draft him. Stuff like that. Like,
it's always what you want to hear.
Yeah, I think Vivek's the issue.
Yeah, I'm pretty much going to co-sign everything Sasa just said. That's pretty much every word out of my mouth. I think ownership is probably worth 90% of the blame currently.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue, and you're hoping for Kings fans they can get that kind of figured out. But that wraps it up for the Kings. As always, thank you everybody for listening. Sasha, thanks for hopping on for the first time. Kory, as always, and you can check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio.
Woohoo! Peace out, Knucklehead.